Welcome to the Road to Recovery webinar on the future of work, brought together by Interel, independent public affairs and advisory firm. I'm Emma Jacobs, I'm a feature writer from the FT, and I have a particular focus on work, which, as you can imagine, has been pretty busy and fascinating in the last few months. Just to give you an outline of today's session, it's for an hour. I'll ask all the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll go into a discussion. And then at the end, there'll be time for about 20 minutes of Q&As. There's a pop-up on the side which you should be able to send me questions throughout, and I'll ask them at the end. So if I can take everybody in turn to introduce themselves. Sunil, how's your work been in the last few months?
Hi, yeah, a pleasure to be here. It's been pretty interesting, as you say, the last 6 months. I'm working from home. I'm the CEO and the president of the Project Management Institute. It's a global organization, not-for-profits, and we have operations all around the world. A big part of what we do is, obviously, there's the standards and the examinations that we offer in the world of project management, but we also reach out to our community of well over 3 million project managers through events and activities, which of course have all been put on hold because of COVID. And we've moved the entire operation to a 100% remote working. We did that over a 48-hour period across the globe. You know, we're in 300 locations around the world, so it was a pretty significant thing that we did back in February. And then we've been inventing as we go along from that point onwards, and we're now looking to see, we've transformed completely into a very, very different type of organization. So yeah.
Great. Melanie. Sorry, Sunil.
No, that's fine.
Melanie. There's a bit of a delay, so I might kind of cut people off mid conversation. Melanie, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Melanie Christopher. I currently head up Capita's People, Culture and Change division within their consulting team. And I've spent the last 20 years helping organisations make major changes to their businesses, organisational culture, and help them navigate the future of work. So it's been a very, very interesting time the last 4 months. Emma, do you want me to answer the question as well, or just introduce myself?
Just I mean, just how I can see you working from a barn.
Yeah.
Is that different to normal?
Yeah, I mean, I think many of us have been part of a huge experiment over the last 4 months, and one that has largely proved that a remote way of working can work and help myth bust along the way. So I've enjoyed it, actually.
And Carlos, hi.
Hi. Yeah, my name is Carlos Frischmuth. I'm working with Hayes in Germany, international recruiting company. I'm responsible for part of the operative business here with in my team more than 200 people I'm responsible for, and more than 1,000 external people in projects, and also responsible for public affairs and governmental relations. Of course, also our life changed a lot in Germany. And also in the, of course, in the business. I'm now back to work. As you can see, this is my office, back now for 1 or 2, 3 days per week. But our people, only 30% are back in office because of the distance rules. And so it's still really, it feels very, very difficult. The subject which is struggling me the most is how we as managers can be effective to drive in these circumstances our, let's say, expectations from stakeholders and results and all that, and be effective as leaders. This is one of my major, let's say, personal struggling points. So it would be nice to discuss that also in this round. And of course about regulations, which are also very, it's a very hot topic also here in Germany, of course.
Great.
Hope you understand me, because I'm one of the few non-natives and try to give my best English to you today.
It's very good, thank you. Certainly better than my German. And Thomas.
Yes,
Hello.
good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, my name is Thomas Boué, and I lead BSA's policy operations throughout the EMEA region. BSA is a global trade association representing the B2B software companies, companies like Adobe, Microsoft, Oracle, Salesforce, Workday, Splunk, and many others, and companies who've been driving the digital transformation of not just work, but also our societies in general, the way that we interact with one another, the way that businesses continue to operate, generally, but also governments. And so I'm in a very interesting position because on the one hand, these are the tools that we've been talking about for years on the remote economy and how to drive this, and we had to experience firsthand, in our work. So in a nutshell, I mean, my job is I'm a lobbyist, right? So the lobbyist is is a pretty simple job. There's two parts of it. One is analyzing, regulations, legislation, whatever happens, and trying to understand how it will have an impact on economy and society, on the companies' business models, and advocating that to regulators, policymakers, to weigh in on the pieces of legislation they're working on. So a huge part of our job is meetings. Is going to a meeting, going to a conference, going to an interview with journalists, going to a lot of things. And obviously, starting, March 16th, you're stuck at home. You have to stay home and you can't go anywhere. And that has a huge impact on our ability to engage, to advocate, to continue, having these conversations. And I'll stop there, but I'll go back in a little later. But in an interesting way, that has also had a lot of benefits and positives that I'm happy to also share with everyone.
Now, are you at home? I can't actually tell.
No, I'm in the office. I received special permission from my boss in the US to come to the office. I mean, our offices all around the world are closed, but the wired connection here is much better. So for conferences, it's a plus.
So I'm speaking from a spare bedroom, which could be tidier, as I noticed in my backdrop. And the so Melanie, has this crisis changed the way that we work and the type of work that we do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's forever changed, to be honest with you, but I'll answer that in three parts. For my colleagues, as I said, we've been on this huge experiment for the last 4 months, and I would say it's largely worked. If I'm truly honest, and it has really done this sort of myth busting. Do we all really need to be in the same place? Do we need to jump on an airplane every 5 minutes? Can you actually build a culture in a remote workforce? I would argue that you probably can. And is the office sacrosanct? But it's been a constant source of annoyance to me over the years. That despite all the fanfare and substantially better technologies, very little has changed over the last decade. You only have to look at the ONS figures. Only 5% of adults in employment work primarily from home in the UK, and that was barely an increase from 4.3% in 2015. And whilst about 12% of us, spent some time of the working week from home, it was still considered a bit of a luxury. So I would say that the crisis has asked us to rethink many of the assumptions we've made about how, where, and when we work. And do we really need to start at 9 a.m. and finish at 6 p.m? But I would say for me, it's also raised some new challenges. And the biggest one for me personally is it's not so much about working from home, it's about we've actually begun to live at work, and so how do we make sure that we don't sit stationary in front of a screen all day with back-to-back meetings talking to a computer, which I find frankly exhausting, and I also find it not great for my back. How do we ensure the mental health of our people? How do we support those who are actually living at home alone in their own bubble? How do we engage our people who hate seeing themselves over video? And I have a number of my team that really, really dislike this. How do we support those, with young families or balancing carer responsibilities? You know, as I shared earlier, you know, I've got 4 boys at home. The most stressful thing I had throughout lockdown was managing schooling commitments whilst working from home. And, you know, that was without a doubt the most stressful part of lockdown for me. But we also need to consider the way we work as an organisation has fundamentally changed. And my experience has been that we are responding to clients at 4 times the speed. 1 day is now a week, 1 week is now a month, 1 month is now, you know, for what we would achieve in 4 months. And that again has been a huge myth buster. You know, I believe very firmly productivity has not been impaired in any way. In actual fact, I think we've achieved more. Productivity has massively improved. I also think that culturally, particularly in my organisation, we have changed. You know, the organisation I work for is a hugely complicated organisation, which is only partway through a major multi-year transformation programme. But what I saw is that this crisis actually triggered a warlike effort, and I witnessed some of the most extraordinary display of solidarity I'd ever seen in my organisation. You know, with folks setting aside their internal badges and P&Ls, being truly agile, spinning up solutions without any funding, being truly innovative. So for me, the key thing now for an organisation, and what I'm working with my CEO and the exec on, is actually there are some things that have emerged out this crisis organisationally that we need to bottle. We must never go back to our old way of working. So as we transition back to the new normal, how do we ensure that we pull levers in our operating model so that we do not sleepwalk back into our old way of working? And then for our clients, you know, I would say pitches are very, very different. Collaboration with clients, very, very different. You know, we have transitioned to a life of online workshops with using tools such as Miro and others that, frankly, I just didn't see either myself or clients doing that quite easily. You know, we are embracing new tech and new ways of working, and actually transformation is now a reality for most of the organizations I'm working with. You know, whereas I used to have very, very interesting conversations around the future of work with clients, but everyone thought the future of work was somewhere else in the future. It is a real reality now, you know, and the burning platform is very, very much here. So more than ever, I think, you know, the future of work is relevant and supporting our clients to navigate this. But I think it has fundamentally changed, you know, for our colleagues, you know, our teams, for our organisations, and also for our clients.
Yeah, the future of work, I used to call it the future of work industrial complex, because it seemed like this huge industry had kind of built up around the future of work, but now it seems to be here. Thomas, do you think that there have been skills and aptitudes that we've developed in the last 3 months that will continue to be used or need to be tweaked when we return to some kind of normality?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, first of all, one of the things that I would like to stress is that whereas, 60% of the world population has been confined and had to stay at home, I think many jobs actually can be done remotely and can be done in ways that Melanie described earlier and that I will talk about. But I think we also have to be cognizant that many jobs, essential workers and others, cannot. Mm-hmm. And I think so that as we go back to the new normal, I think some things will change for certain jobs, certain types of activities, but not necessarily for everything else. But regardless of that, I think there's a number of skills and things that we all had to learn, firsthand. I think, when the office shuts down, with 24 hours notice, it's about, being able to be resilient. I think, resilience is something that we've seen across everyone. Flexibility. I think, and Melanie mentioned it very, very, very interestingly, how do you ensure that you can, do your job from home where you have, you have children, you have elderly parents there, or you have a lot of things that, that are distractions, not in a sense of, but really about things that and how do you, work around that? How does management, how do you ensure that your teams feel that they have the ability to be able to deal with certain things immediately, and that will, have an impact on the day's work. I think Melanie mentioned it very, very well. 9 to 6, is that the new normal? Who knows? These are things. So being able to be flexible, both from a, staff and side, but also for management, understanding that your people will also have to do a number of things, ensuring proper time management and really calling for help and ensuring that you have a management, or you have a team that is will be willing to discuss and exchange and try to find ways to make it as as easy on everyone as possible. One thing, patience. Patience is a skill that we all had to learn. Be it for being unable to unmute yourself in a call because your computer is crashing, or because the tech is not working. These are things. I mean, these are real things. They may sound trivial, but they are actually important. I think this is great. But the real focus, I think, that we're looking at is how do you look at your teams, and how do you make sure that they have everything they need and they feel supported and empowered. Just give you a couple of examples of the things that we've done at BSA, which I think are pretty remarkable. One of them is to tell us, well, listen, you're stuck. You're going to be in a place. It doesn't matter if it's your home or if it's your parents' home, it's your friend's house. Go wherever you feel most comfortable, where you feel that you can have as much of a normal life as possible while being able to do the tasks that you have to do. Another things that they did, which I think is remarkable, is being at home and living where you work where you live. It has a huge strain on your mental health. If you are lucky to have a big house, you can move rooms. If you are unlucky to live in a small apartment in a big city, then your living room is going to be where you eat, where you watch TV, and where you also work during the day. And so BSA, one of the things that our management has introduced is the mental health day. So it's 1 day a month that every employee has to take. And on that day, you're not allowed to look at your emails, to look at your phone. Or, I mean, you can look at your phone, if you to text friends and family, but nothing work related. And it's, and it's been really well respected by everyone. Myself included. I have a hard time, to disconnect. But that's what I felt, and I had mine a couple of weeks ago, and I felt so refreshed. The next day when I had to go back in front of my computer, I feel like, okay, well, for the last 24 hours, I had no idea what happened, and it's fine. And that's good. So I think and the change will be constant. I think we're all learning as we go, but these are the main things I'd like to highlight.
I like the idea of a mental health day. Yeah. Is your mum allowed to call you?
Excuse me?
Is your mum allowed to call you?
Of course. I mean, personal things are fine, but yeah.
And Sunil, so do you think that it's too early to write the obit for the office? I mean, are you desperate to go back to the office?
Actually, it's interesting because, I spent a fair bit of my time traveling personally, and I was going into the office when I could. But it's clear that I actually don't really need to do my job as the CEO from a head office anymore. I actually get more interaction with the teams across the organization from sitting here. In fact, in one day, I can be in 15 different countries on 15 different emails and WebExes, etc. So I've actually got closer to the community. Do I think that it's the end of offices? I don't think that's going to be the case. I think there'll always be a need for having a place where people can congregate. And I think that some of the issues highlighted earlier around mental health and the ability to interact with your colleagues physically is something that will never really go away. People will look forward to it. Whether you actually need to be working to do that and being in a working environment, I think that's a separate thing. I think you can do a lot of everything that we do now is by WebEx or by Teams or by Zoom or something. So the work side of it we can cover remotely, and I think that people in our organization, certainly we've got 3-4 scenarios. One where we're asking our people, could you work 100% from home? And another one is a hybrid model, and another one is return back to the office. And right now, where we're landing is everyone wants to work from home. So, and they would like to have perhaps, some place where they can go. It doesn't have to be in the city. It can be satellite, facilities that you can go to. You can meet not just from a work perspective, from a social perspective as well, to sort of to wind down. So I think that there's definitely going to be a change. I don't see a need for us to have a head office per se with finance in there, legal in there, HR. All of these functions can work from home quite happily, and in fact prefer it. There are issues that, I mean, the guys on the call have already highlighted that I won't go into, but you know, an example, we also did, took back in May the 4th, actually, the productivity levels had gone through the roof, and it's not sustainable because everyone's working from home. We decided on May the 4th to take the entire company to take a day off. No email, no WebEx, no nothing, just to recharge, because as I said, the productivity levels are going through the roof. So you can be working from home, but you have to be very, very conscious of the fact that you're on all the time. And it's very easy that the whole day just disappears. So you start at 7 in the morning, before you know it, it's 9 o'clock in the evening, and you haven't even moved out of your chair. Not only is it bad for your back, but it's bad for your mental health, you know. So there are going to be challenges that organizations will need to face with teams of people working from, not just the distraction of having kids and a dog barking in the background, but, you know, just mentally, how people are going to respond. How do you empathize with people when I can't see the body language of a meeting that I'm having right now, the sentiment of people right now, the tools that are in place, the technology tools that are in place do not give me that extra input that I get from a face-to-face interaction yet. I think they'll start to, but it'll be informed. It'll be almost, you know, an algorithm that will give you some kind of insight, but it's not there today. So, you know, we have to be a lot more empathetic. If we're going to be working from home, we have to be very cognitive of the people who are working in very different environments. Right now, we're in an anxious state. Nobody really knows what the outcome is going to be because of COVID. Nobody knows what the outcome is going to be on the economy. So today, we're in an anxious state. In 6 months' time, we'll probably be in a more balanced state, and there'll be other issues. But I do think that much of what we've been able to achieve in the last 150 days, we have kind of like lowered the bar for change resistance. You know, we've flattened that curve. I think people are recognizing that they need to change a lot more readily now than they were pre-COVID, and they're stepping up, and people are doing that. I can see it on this call. Much of what people are talking about are exactly the things that we've had to deal with ourselves, and I'm sure much of the things that I've had to deal with, everybody on this call is also dealing with right now.
Actually, Carlos, I wanted to bring you in because you're part of the time at the office. How have you found the arrangement of kind of a hybrid model working? Do you have to get people in to meet at the same time and so on?
Yeah, I have to be a bit more, let's say, I'm more critical on all what was said. Maybe I have to go into the challenger position and pour some water into the wine. Because I have a very positive perception of people and also my own employees, but at the same time, I don't see that productivity levels. Maybe because I'm looking also on jobs where we put a lot of rookies in recruiting, in the world of recruiting, same as in consulting. Most of part of in consulting where you train people up, you know, and I don't compare myself in my own, let's say, manifestation over more than 20 years in business with a lot of discipline and a different mindset, which was created in that time, and compared to what to the new people on the job we have, where they learn their jobs through a lot of also quantity. So I'm not that positive on that, and I can see it in the office. If I would show it around, you know, I'm sitting in my own office, but we have like open space offices. You would say, hey, where are the people? Okay, now it's lunchtime in Germany, we're 1 hour back, but they are not there. And always there's the question, yeah, the people want to come back. Really? Why should they? Because they have to come here, they have to drive here by public transportation, whatever, and all that. So then maybe it's cheaper to cook at home and all that. So I don't see that the positive dynamic. I can see it, but there's also some risks, especially in the world of young professionals and rookies, which have to be trained or have to be introduced to a culture. And culture is created through what? Leadership, management, surrounding. So is that possible to create at home? Maybe with a lot of professional people coming together in a very mature surrounding. But that's not true for so many companies, even in the let's say the knowledge work world. We are just talking about that, right? We're not talking about production sites and all that. Homework's not possible there, as we know it today, maybe with 3D print or whatever. Yeah, I think we have to be very, very, let's say, we have to need a distinct discussion about what is happening. But maybe that, if it's okay to be a little bit more on the challenger side. So I'm very positive, but at the same time, my stomach is not very, let's say, safe.
Yeah, I'm nervous about especially the young graduate starters. It's very hard to enter the world of work at home, I think.
Can I just make a comment? Somebody.
Yes, you can.
Said, so just on that, I mean, we're also seeing it's not just at work that we're having this phenomenon of people working remotely. If you're talking about students and the academic world as well, a lot of universities are now pivoting towards online learning and interacting online. I'm questioning whether the business model for universities is still fallible, because a lot of universities in the UK, let's say, rely heavily on income coming from foreign students. A lot of those foreign students have to get visas and whatnot to come to the country. They're actually now saying, is that even a sustainable model? Can those kids actually learn from home, the same course, the same subject? And in fact, rather than just tag themselves to one university, why not tag themselves to universities' lecturers? And so they can actually have a hybrid of universities and go and select the lecturer, the person with the content that they want to work with, as opposed to being tagged to a particular university. So you're starting to see the models, the old traditional models, break down. And the point I was making here is that if kids are going to go into that direction, when they come out of university, they're already going to be tuned to working in a remote fashion. So I think things like culture are important. And yes, you need to be face-to-face to build a sense of purpose, but you can also start to create that online. If your entire working pattern is working from home, you will create your own, culture as an organization, which is obviously something which will also transform as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thomas, do you think that the lockdown has been the catalyst that will provide the kind of final business transformation, not the final business transformation, but at last some real lasting change as opposed to a blip?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think so. I think it's truly, I mean, for the last 4 months, 60% of the world's population has been home and tried to deal with that and work from home. And I think that will clearly have some longer lasting effects. I think, to jump back to what Sunil was saying, I think from our perspective, what we're seeing is, I was talking earlier about the positives of all the situation. And for instance, in our job, where you are engaging with regulators and policymakers, we are, I mean, as I said, we're a global organization because we represent global companies who have concerns that arise in different parts of the world. Before the crisis, right, when we wanted to have a meeting, let's say in the US or in Singapore or in Japan, you had to take a plane there, or you had to, go out with your colleagues. And people were reluctant to take video calls or even calls. Now, if you time it right, you can bring, in a video conference, just like the one we're having now, somebody on the East Coast of the US, somebody in Europe, and somebody in Asia, and have a conversation that you would never have had before. And that, and agree with Sunil that it does not replace the human contact, right? The chit chat in going to the meeting, the coffee that you may have, but it still, allows people from a lot of different places to be connected, to talk, to exchange, to understand points of view. And that, I think, has brought a lot of positive, because people realize that, this is possible. And, instead of, traveling to a meeting, going through security, getting into the room, you know, and everybody's rushing. That allows you to pack more in a day and have more meaningful conversations. So I think they will have longer lasting effects. And I think Melanie was saying that earlier, we will also question, is that trip necessary? You know, I used to be on a plane or a train, like, you know, every week, every other week, and sometimes for a 2 hours meeting here or there. And I would never question, say, yes, it makes sense. Now I would say, well, does that make sense? Could I do that differently? And so I think that we'll do that. But the changes will happen in part, indeed, if management and organizations, you know, from the top down, will also have this realization that things will change. But also governments have a huge role to play in there. You know, at the SA, our job is to engage with governments, and we released a few weeks ago what we call the Response and Recovery Agenda, which deals about how governments can prepare for the future. First, you know, recover and then prepare for the future. And I think I was reading earlier in one of the comments on the chat, connectivity, for instance, is a huge thing that governments need to ensure that people throughout the countries have access to high-speed broadband, be it, you know, fixed broadband, but also, you know, secure 5G technologies that is coming. That, you know, governments ensure that they remove barriers to electronic commerce and to exchanges of data across borders, that there's a proper responsible migration to cloud services, and also, you know, that there's a strong emphasis put on education, training, skilling, ensuring that people who are going to work remotely, either at home or otherwise, will have the skills to actually be able to do that. And I think for younger generations, it will be fine. But I think for people who are, you know, in the middle of their career or something, these were like things that were totally new. So making sure that they are trained, that they have the proper skills would be extremely important. And the last thing I will say is governments also need to lead by example. I think we're seeing across the world so many governments who are not used to using these new technologies, who are still running on software that is sometimes 15, 20 years old, which is not at all what is needed today. And governments need to understand that they need to do all this for their citizens, for businesses, but also for themselves and for their own government offices, because that is the way that we'll truly move on to a you know, new world and new reality of future work. But it goes beyond that. To me, it goes like future of society.
Actually, Carlos, can I bring you in at this point and ask you what you think politicians can do to help accelerate change after the crisis in terms of work?
You mean in terms of, let's say, labor market work or work especially? Work especially. Yeah, I mean, what we can see already is the last few years already in Germany that we realize that something is going on with the skill shift, you know. So which means that you need different kind of qualifications. You don't have people, you know, like engineering in the automotive industry is not anymore engineering. Now it's maybe more software, you know, like this is something maybe also what Tesla brought in, and Germany is famous for engineering, but maybe not for the best software. I don't know. So we government, and we can see in our government is a high discussion on that, and we have exchange on that. How is digitization driving skill shift, and what is the answer of government on that? Because a big danger for democracy is, of course, increasing unemployment. So we need an answer on that. What are the skills we need in the future? And government has to react on that. And Thomas, you already addressed that subject. And what is training offered by government? That's a very important subject because we need to secure employability. That's crucial. And this is a question which is in most of the countries not answered enough. And some countries suffer more, and other countries address it better. So this is something which needs to be in focus. What are the skills of the future? What needs to be done by government, and of course also the companies and the industry in the market. And what are the industries of the future? For example, we discuss in Germany, of course, this subject, like new mobility concepts. Is hydrogen maybe a fuel which we have to focus more on, strengthen rail and all that alternative energy models, and because these are maybe the industries for the future, and we need to adapt to that. And there needs to be an answer from governments, of course, even down then to flexible work. And we discuss now in Germany here the home office regulation. Will there be a right on having home office, and what does that mean to employers? So these are big questions we have to answer now.
And Melanie, if I can ask you the same question, what do you think politicians can do to help change?
Well, I actually think we all have a role to play in this, whether it's social reform, social mobility, workforce reform, career model change. I think we also have to deal in evidence, so we should be collecting a lot of data and cataloguing insights so that we really understand the real impact of this crisis versus, you know, the noise that can stem from a crisis. But I agree with some of the points that are made. You know, I think, you know, governments have to realise that, in my lifetime, in my generation, it was possible that you might have 5 jobs. In my children's generation, it's possible they might have 5 different careers. So we have to rethink, actually, and it starts right at education. I see that there's been a number of comments made on that, but it starts right at the education level. You know, I don't think typical education is going to remain in its current format. And actually, you know, I have watched some of the organisations like Harvard and Cambridge who say they won't go back for until potentially 2021, 2022, and they've gone online. Actually, that could be a good thing because it makes it accessible to the many rather than the few. So, you know, in terms of, you know, social reform and social mobility, that would be a very good thing. I think, you know, in my organisation, we're currently working on some of society's biggest challenges. You know, we are now solving problems that were they were unimaginable only a few months ago. You know, so the work that we support DWP on, for example, you know, we were very, very well set up, and DWP was very well set up to deal with helping low-skilled people get into meaningful work. You know, are we really well set up to deal with people looking for meaningful work who are highly educated when whole sectors have collapsed? You know, so that is a challenge that no one ever thought would actually happen. So, you know, there's a lot of new thinking that's required for that. So I also think the state will be large for a while, but I think it will step back, and I think it will rely on, I don't know, banking institutions and large corporates to take a much larger role in the recovery. I also think that people need to understand that movements will become mainstream. Society will hold organisations to account. And we have to recognise that across all institutions at the moment, there is a huge trust issue that needs to be addressed. You know, many citizens are just deeply disenchanted with a political system they feel has failed them. You know, and, you know, as we know from the Edelman Trust Barometer, it shows that trust is quite local, and the employer is one of the most trusted relationships. So I do think that is going to remain true. So whilst we've got loads of challenges, though, I also think there are a lot of opportunities to learn from the crisis and rethink and reimagine actually how we work and live. And if there's anything that should be a legacy of this pandemic at this point, where we're able to really seize the moment and really truly change and transform. I hate the saying we should never waste a good crisis, actually, but this is a moment in time where we can really reimagine what the future looks like, right from education, right through to the reskilling revolution, and really think about how we can impact positively on society to make it fairer, if I'm truly honest.
And just before I ask Carlos another question, we'll be taking questions, so if anybody wants to send some more questions, please do. We've had a couple of comments so far. Carlos, I mean, Melanie was talking about the kind of political and everyone responsibility, but what about corporate leaders and managers in terms of change, lasting change, change for the better? What do you think they need to do?
I mean, for each company, it's really crucial that we understand the power of leadership. Of course, in the new work discussion, we also heard about holacracy models and all that. And of course, there's a discussion about agile, which means maybe more team responsibility and all that. But at the same time, I think all this is equally there when we have to understand that. But at the same time, which for me, major learning is in this crisis, and it was already clear before, but that leadership, the responsibility of leadership won't go away. Because we have discussed about culture, right? It's a very, that we have influence on culture subjects. And what creates culture is leadership. So leaders become more important, good leaders become more important. And we also raised the question of trust. And we have to be clear that leadership also creates trust in the companies and outside what the company stands for. If we believe that companies are doing also not only serving their shareholders, but also doing good effect on society and all that. And all this has to be clear for every employee. So we need a good expectation management, and we need clearness in what leaders want from their members, team members, and employees. And this is at the end transported in employer brands to the outer world. And therefore, I was a bit struggling with the message that we have maybe, oh, it's clear that we have higher productivity. And Melanie said, okay, we need data. And we also need data for that. Is that really like that? Because if we don't have that productivity in projects, in production, in creative work, and I don't see those, let's say, the measurement there. I don't see any measurement there. So is that really there? Because if not, we also have a problem with trust from leaders to their employees and vice versa. So very complex subject. So leadership is being more important because culture, creating of culture in the virtual world is even more struggling and difficult. So we have to see all that together. It is. I think that's a nice challenge for leaders and management. I'm open to that, but I can see also that people say, "Oh, it's even getting more complex." They're complaining about that. Of course, it's getting more complex. Yes, that's the truth.
And the quality, the quality of data is very important, and I mean this crisis has really brought to light how people measure work in terms of outcomes rather than
because Sunil,
sitting at their desk.
Maybe because some of you also said that you can see it's clear that the productivity is rising. Is it really there, or is it maybe a projection of our hopes that it's there, and we don't? I'm not sure about that. I'm sorry to be a bit in the challenger position, but I'm not sure about if the productivity is there. Is it really there? There's the wish for it, but is the discipline there to create that?
And also, it's very hard to tell while schools are being shut how productive you are. But just a couple of points from Simon Carter from RM Education, talking about EdTech, that he challenges Melanie's point about home learning. I mean, in my own experience, it's certainly driven me mad for quite a big period of the time. And he thinks that there's a role for hybrid learning, home and remote. I'm not convinced about. I mean, I think that the role of school in some way is babysitting for people who can go out and work properly. But I think it needs a lot of coordination. And also, his other point was about remote working. And he's pointed to you, Thomas. You've come into the office to have this discussion. Could you not do it at home?
I could have done it at home easily. The thing is, I just felt that, having a wired connection here was a lot easier for me, and there's no, noise or anything. You know, I mean, we're a household where everybody's working from home. So, you know, trying to ensure that, you know, that I have, you know, peace and quiet, you know, it's true. But you know, that's the point I was making earlier on, you know, connectivity. That's the point that Simon was making. I think we're seeing, and, you know, I'm lucky. I live in Brussels. You know, connectivity is relatively good, but if you go somewhere, you know, country or somewhere else, you know, you know, Wi-Fi, the broadband is not necessarily there, or it's there, but, you know, at lower, you know, speeds. So I think, you know, focusing on that is a critical element for everything, because without it, we won't be able to sustain. I think Sunil made the point earlier. You know, we've seen an increase in, you know, people being at home, and the bandwidth used for a lot of different things, and not just, you know, working, but also, you know, entertainment. You know, I mean, when you have, you know, schools that now going classes online, when you need to have, you know, 30 kids, you know, connected as well with their teacher to learn things. You know, everybody's using that, and, you know, and that is a critical thing that I think governments, and I know they're thinking about it, but this is a thing that they should really put a strong emphasis on, because this is the backbone. Without it, none of these new technologies, none of these tools that, you know, my companies are creating and putting and ensuring that, you know, won't be able to work, because you need to have this infrastructure that is absolutely critical.
And to the point around remote learning, get me wrong, I cannot wait. Right, I'm done. Okay. What I would say is my children have also become experts on a game called Fortnite, which is very worrying throughout the schooling day. Okay, very worrying. I would not embrace home learning at all, because I think you go to school to be much more rounded individuals. It's actually not about, it's not just about, you know, the education. It's about equal factors being measured on the human skills you develop. And actually, one of the reasons why we selected the school that my children go to is they focus on human skills for the future. As someone who has studied the future of work and consults on the future of work, I know that learning Latin might be interesting, but it's not very important when we're thinking about having 5 careers going forward. So they actually have lessons around diversity and inclusion. They have lessons about resilience and building resilience very early on. So one of the reasons why I want my children to go to school, because I want them to learn the uniquely human skills which will transcend some of the skills that we have today and jobs we have today, because we don't know what our jobs of the future will be.
I want to add to that. I mean, one of the things that we've been looking at in the Project Management Institute is the fact that when you used to apply for jobs in the past, you would leave a little on your CV. You'd have a little, you know, you're always told, you know, try and keep your CV very, very concise. And then you'd leave a little line where you'd write down, you know, all your interests. And those are the things that define you as an individual. The fact that you like hockey, or you like cricket, or you were a team captain, or whatever. The one line that actually it gets relegated to, just so you can fit it onto the page, say a little bit about what you are. We're calling those the softer skills that organizations are now looking for. People who have developed a point of view about something, or developed skills outside of their education or their experience. They're actually the power skills. We call them the power skills. Children who can learn, or people who can learn in their work about some of these power skills, find themselves in a much better position to develop their careers, and they get much better opportunities. You know, leveraging technology to its hilt, the point that Thomas is making, absolutely. You know, imagine if we didn't have WebEx. Imagine if there wasn't the ability now to be able to have the kind of conversation we're having today. I mean, what would we have done? We would have all sat at home and gone absolutely bonkers, because you can't work. So technology is absolutely enabling people now. And I think what's happened is that this resistance to technology has gone away. And also, because technology is taking over some of the more mundane, perhaps, you know, repetitive tasks, people are starting to focus on, well, what are the skill sets that I need for the future? And those are the power skill sets. You know, collaborative leadership. We talked about leadership being a critical component. What has this done for me as a leader, as a CEO for, you know, a large institute? The fact that I've had to really develop hard collaborative skills, recognizing that lots of people have lots of points of views, and being able to bring them all together, regardless of where they are, because they have a point of view is very, very important. Much more important than when it was more of a command and control type of environment, perhaps before, pre-COVID. Now everyone's got a point of view. They can speak, and you can have access to people from all over the world in your dialogues and discussions. So bringing that together is very, very important. So I think,
and I would,
power skills. Go ahead. I mean, power skills are super important, and technology is table stakes. We need more of it. Those are my 2 points.
I would fully confirm, if I can add a few thoughts from the world of recruiting, which I'm in Hayes, that fully confirmed with the power skills and talking about skills and abilities and all that, because this is not which is shown to a CV, right? Yeah. And we still say, even in those times, we need interviews. Most of the recruiting interviews, and we do thousands per month in Hayes with external candidates for our clients, which has now switched to video calls and conference calls. So it's finding out about those power skills you're talking about, right? And not what is there in the CV. Somebody is a good programmer or analyst or whatever. So is he fitting to the team? So this won't go away, right? This we know that these soft skills are most relevant for success in companies and all that. So this is interesting thing. Some things don't go away. So just to confirm you, that stays important, and that is troubling us as recruiters to be able to do the matching, even if platforms come up, and what's the human side of matching and recruiting is a subject which is very important for us, and it keeps the challenge. Just to confirm your thoughts, fully confirmed.
Can I just ask another question to Thomas from Ollie Freestone? He says, how important is innovation and taking risks going to be to get us out of this slump? For example, governments being bold by changing how cities operate, transport, or organisations in terms of how they work and markets they operate in. That's something you feel you can answer?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I was saying before, the governments need to lead by example. The governments need to pave the way for this. I mean, the companies that represent are providing tools. They're doing, the imagination that they have, to make things faster, easier, to ensure that you freeze time for people to do things that matter. Like a lot of the things that my companies are doing today is like related to artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence as a tool to process vast amounts of data to help come to a decision much faster without, using, making it helpful for humans to actually make the ultimate decision. What we've done throughout the COVID crisis was to try to look at all the tools, all the technology, all the different new ways of doing things that our companies were putting out there, sometimes for free, sometimes with huge discounts, just to help governments. And governments had no idea because they don't know where to look. They are, in a way, and I'm not sort of pointing the finger, just saying that they are used to a certain way of working, and all these changes, it will be hard for them to fathom. So I think what we need to do is to have much more focus and much more of a positive outlook towards technology. I think technology was seen as oh my God, it's gonna replace humans. It's gonna. No, technology is there to actually help to make sure that we focus on the things that matter, and the things that don't matter, can be easily, automated and things like this. But we spent enormous amounts of time over the last 4 months to talk to governments, to educate them, and educating not in a derogatory way, but more in a, hey, listen, these are all the things that you guys could be using, you guys could be promoting, the things that you could, and that is the thing that we pride ourselves in all the tools that our companies have and are putting out there to really help organizations, governments, others to succeed. But there needs to also be a recognition by governments that they need the help. They will need to work with technology companies. I think the time where governments knew all the answers and could figure it out all on their own, I think is gone. And the sooner they realize that companies, enterprises are there to help them to work together. Carlos was mentioning earlier a very important thing on training. I think governments can do a lot of trainings, but a lot of the companies that I represent do enormous amount of training, not just for their own workforce, but for whoever wants to learn new things, new tools, because ultimately they feel they have a responsibility to the future of our societies in general, right? And that is a thing that, and we're seeing a lot of places where governments are, quite, how can I say that? Then well, it's a thing that's a regalian issue that should be done by the government. No, hold on. Let's work, let's partner together, and because that's the only way that we can actually succeed and strive and recover and move on. So I think that there needs to be a shift in the thinking, and this is my plea. If there's any government officials watching us today or watching later, we're here to help. We're here to really ensure that we all succeed together in this post-crisis situation.
I think I've got time for one more question, possibly to Melanie, actually, from Dowlet Akhmetov. He says, well, I don't know if you can predict whether there's going to be changes in regulations on the wearing of masks, but how do you motivate employees to put masks on and socially distance? I mean, this must be something that you've thought about in terms of workplaces.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, there is no plan for my organisation to go back to the office yet. So they are taking a super cautious approach. And that's, I mean, I work in an organisation where, we run a lot of legacy outsourcing. So call centres, bums on seat with headsets. So the fact that we were able to mobilise and get our employees into the home place and face some of the challenges. So for someone like me, it's quite easy. I've got broadband. I'm used to using the tech from working from home because I regularly worked from home. Some of the challenges we were facing with our call center staff were very different. They didn't have a place to work from home for a start, to the point that someone made earlier. They didn't have broadband in some instances, and they'd never worked off of laptops. So very, very different challenges. But currently today, there's no plan for my organisation to go back. But, if we were to be speaking to our employees about going back to work and being safe, it's being self-interested in their health and well-being. It isn't in our interest at all for our colleagues to get unwell. So it's about helping people understand, the benefits for the many, rather than, making a unilateral decision that you're not going to wear a mask and so on and so forth. I mean, it's interesting. I was speaking to my CEO earlier this week, and he was saying PwC, for example, have opened up their offices, but for only the under 25s. Because they were really, really worried about the mental health of their people, the fact that they were people were lonely, and wanted to connect with their friends and colleagues. But again, they've had to put some pretty, we really support you, we're really worried about you being lonely, but in order for us to open our offices, you're going to have to comply with some certain things. You are going to have to socially distance. You are going to have to wear masks. So it's about explaining it when starting from a place of positive intent for the individual, I think.
Well, thank you very much for an interesting session. I mean, some of the things that I've taken away from is I'm quite struck by Melanie's idea of living at work, which wasn't how I envisaged my life, really. But and also the need to become resilient and flexible, and also learning patience during this time has been really very interesting and important. And thinking about the next generation coming through education and workforce. Thank you very much, Sunil, Thomas, Melanie, and Carlos, and also to Interel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your invitation.